We're here with Ivo Marsak, who has celebrated 50 years of selling for NFIB, and here in early November of 2009 has been inducted into the NFIB Hall of Fame in recognition of the career achievement Ivo has accomplished here at NFIB and what it means to all of us here at NFIB. And we have a guardian statue, which is typically reserved just for legislators who have strong voting records with NFIB. One of the most prized possessions for any member of the Congress who's pro-free enterprise, and that statue has been presented to Ivo in recognition of his going into the Hall of Fame.
You want me to say a little background about me? I was born in Czechoslovakia 100 years ago. I mean 84. I mean
100 years ago.
84 years ago, and in the city of Prague. We were occupied by the Germans in the 30s, and of course we were there throughout the entire Nazi 60 years, which was a very difficult times. I was on labor for, I don't know, for over a year. I was a little skinnier than I am today. But anyway, after the war, 1945, Czechoslovakia reverted again to being a constitutional republic, and gradually political situation has changed into communist dictatorship. I worked for a university professor who was an outspoken opponent to the communist regime, and he was eventually sentenced to death. And he was my uncle, incidentally. We had to escape over there in the middle of it. I should say that I studied law, and I had one examination to go to get a doctor's degree when we had to escape. Then in France, I applied for a scholarship. I applied for two things: immigration to Australia as a refugee, and a scholarship in the United States. I was fortunate to get a scholarship in the United States because the Australian government was too late to send me a ticket to get up there. I was broke. I had 1 cent in my pocket, incidentally, when I came to the United States. So I get to the United States, and the Methodist Church realized they gave a scholarship to a Roman Catholic, but it was no problem. I got along with them just fine, mowing lawns and studying. I got my degree just in time for the U.S. government to draft me into the Korean War. So I was drafted in the Army. I put in 2 years in the medics, even though my background was law and business administration. But after the war, I was so full of brushes because I wanted a job immediately, if not sooner. If I wouldn't have been drafted in the Army, I would have probably stayed to teach college. Again, and so I ended up doing full of brushes. Then I met somebody, and he got me involved with the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, and I was with them for, I don't know, several years. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up in Washington, D.C., and Wilson Johnson, who became president of NFIB, was actually my boss with the chamber, and then he was my boss, the first guy that he hired. I thought it was the greatest thing. You see, I couldn't quite consolidate in my mind the fact that with the U.S. Chamber we called on small businesses, you see, yet Chamber was more of a big business oriented. Uh-huh. And all of a sudden he was a new organization that represented small business. I thought it was that is great. So with Wilson, he started me in Annapolis, Maryland, and we just absolutely plastered the city with membership. The minimum was $12, A maximum was 100. Now, I was single in those days, just to give you an idea of the money difference. I was single in those days, and then about 4 years later, it was 3 years later, I met my present wife, and going into Albany, I used to treat her in the most expensive restaurant for the most expensive meal. And guess what it was? It was a full-course meal with a 2-pound lobster for $3.50.
Wow.
Within the first year, the regional manager, the one over above everybody, was a very fine gentleman, A. Stuart Clark. A. Stuart Clark he became my friend, and I was a wonderful guy. He's the one actually that promoted me into management. He said, "We'll send you up north." Right area I knew. However, we had no members up there, so I started from zero, virtually zero. I started hiring people, and then we started selling. Eventually, the Syracuse division grew. By the time I got married and started raising children, I got 4 little children, and wanted to be on the road. So one day Wilson and I were fishing, and I have a cottage up in the Adirondack. And I popped on and I said, "Wilson, could I go back in field?" And he said, "Sure." So, and that worked out pretty good. And I went, and I was a salesman. And a couple of times Wilson suggested, he came to Syracuse one day and said, "Would you like to worked as a lobbyist in Washington?" It took me 1 second to say, "No, thank you, Wilson, I'll stay right here selling membership."